applicants that qualify for a knowledge test waiver under the military even exchange program. Currently, the Director of Vehicles can waive skills tests for certain applicants. Under this Senate Bill 462, the Director would additionally be able to waive the skills test for applicants who provide evidence that they qualify for a knowledge test waiver under the military even exchange program. Under the military even exchange program, this allows military members to exchange military license for a CDL and waive the knowledge test if they have certain occupational safety or classification from the military service, and that would qualify these individuals for the military skills test waiver.
Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that the Senate Transportation Committee pass out Senate Bill 462 favorably for passage.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Reddy. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. The bill's on its way. Next, I'd like to turn our attention to Senate Bill 476. Adam, you ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 476 creates a new traffic infraction for individuals found guilty of driving faster than 100 miles per hour. Such individuals would be guilty of excessive speeding. Penalties for guilty violations would be, upon a first conviction, a person would be restricted in driving for 15 days. Upon a second conviction, a restriction would extend to 30 days, and then upon a third conviction, within 3 years, the driver's license would be suspended for 30 days. Person whose driving privileges were restricted will only be able to drive under the normal circumstances for currently restricted driving privileges.
And I believe we had a proposed amendment. I'll offer that amendment if you want to pass that out. Committee, I believe it was brought up in testimony that we needed to clarify that these penalties would be in addition to the current fines. So with that, I would offer the amendment. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Schallenberger. Further discussion on the amendment? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this would alleviate the issue of creating the new statute and not what the conferee had said when he was testifying.
I believe this would guarantee that it would be just it would link the two together. Adam, you want to clarify?
Thank you. Yes, the concern is that when you have elements of the same crime, which traffic infraction is a crime, when they have essentially identical elements, and you can only charge one unless specifically stated otherwise. So speeding, the same elements would go into driving over 100 miles an hour. So rather than having to pick one or not, only pick one of the penalties or the lesser of the penalty, which is usually the current practice is required, they'd be able to charge both speeding and this excessive speeding penalty or crime. Excuse me.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, is that why we're creating another area in statute and not just amending existing for speeding?
Yes, I mean, this creates a whole new crime with its own kind of corresponding penalties. Currently it's a traffic infraction, this would also be, speeding is a traffic infraction with a corresponding fine. This new excessive speeding has no corresponding fine to it. It just has restrictions that would go on the license.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, bothers me that we're having it in 2 locations in statute, and the reason is I'll refer back to gun legislation in previous years. When we thought that we were amending the gun legislation and taking care of it, we didn't realize that there was another section in statute that addressed it. And one of my constituents was charged with, he lost all of his benefits as a disabled veteran and was charged because we had not changed it in both places. So it always concerns me creating another area in statute with similar language. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe this isn't a question about the amendment, but the bill. So there are no fines increased with this new crime?
That is correct. There are no affiliated fines with this new section.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Amendment is adopted. We're back on the bill. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that the Senate Transportation Committee pass out Senate Bill 476 as amended favorably for passage.
Seconded by Senator Cluse. Further discussion on the bill? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Do you wish your no to be recorded? Motion carries. The bill's on its way. We'd like to turn our attention to Senate Bill 426. Adam, could you give us a review?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 426 would increase the penalties when an authorized emergency vehicle is stopped and a driver approaches, essentially move over the law. It increases the penalties, especially for base penalties would be increased from $195 to $400. And if the violation resulted in injury or great bodily harm to a person operating the authorized emergency vehicle as a fire department, police, or ambulance, this would result in a severity level of person 6 felony and a fine of not less than $1,000. And if the violation resulted in death to a person operating the authorized emergency vehicle as a fire department, police, or ambulance, this would result in a severity level 4 person felony and a fine of not less than $7,500. Additionally, in testimony, it was pointed out there would be a technical needed because it was stated law enforcement officer twice, but it should have read firefighter. I have a technical if you'd want me to pass that out.
Why don't you go ahead and pass out that technical? Committee, what's your pleasure on 426, this amendment? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a time to ask questions on it, or do we move on it?
You can ask questions or move.
I just have a question. Are we removing law enforcement and replacing it with firefighter? Is law enforcement already there somewhere else?
Yes, it's
Okay.
right above it. It was duplicated.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know. Then I move we accept the amendment. Thank you.
Stated by Senator Bowers. Further questions? Senator Warren.
Thank you. Actually, it's not on the amendment, it's on the bill.
Further questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. We're back on the bill. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see on page 2 of the bill that the bill does increase the fine for a traffic infraction level violation, increases it. There's a $400 fine, and then if it's a severity level 6 person felony, there's a fine of not less than $1,000, and then if it's a severity level 4 person felony resulting in the death to any person of law enforcement firefighter, there's a fine of not less than $7,500. So it's often important to have those fines as incentives to prohibit the behavior or to discourage the behavior. So I'm glad to see that there's also fines, even though there's large discussion going on about fines and moving violations and, you know, what is the state going to do about that? We have a lot of that discussion in judiciary this session. So it's interesting discussion around fines. Just wanted to bring that up, that we're kind of looking at it differently in different circumstances, which is, you know, just policy decision. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, further questions or comments on the bill? Seeing none, committee, what's your pleasure with Senate Bill 426? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that the Senate Transportation Committee pass out Senate Bill 426 as amended, favorably for passage.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Cluse. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Amendment's on the way. Committee, that's going to conclude our business for today. Please take your brown folders with you. Get your exercise in for the day. We are adjourned.